Okay, everyone, here it is, day 4 with Kneeknock Rise. So the last time we spoke, we were trying to figure out exactly the setting of this novel. And the clues are there in some capacity, but if we think about the fact that they used candles in their homes and they washed using a basin and a pitcher of water. They would just pour water in and wash their faces. And they transported themselves with a horse and buggy, or a mule in this case, and buggy or carriage. So I would guess, if I was to give an actual number, that it would probably be pre-industrial, which is anywhere from 1750 to 1850. So what I want you to do is to keep in mind, as the story continues, other pieces of evidence that point to setting in terms of when this occurred. Obviously, there will be shifts of setting where we are located as the story unfolds too. So, without further ado, let's find out what happens next in our story, titled Kneeknock Rise by Natalie Babbitt. All right. Uncle Anson came home not long after, at supper time, with a large package under his arm. "I've done it, Gertrude," he said solemnly to his wife. "It's finished. It will be the wonder of the fair." "Say hello to Egan," said Aunt Gertrude. "Hello, nephew," said Uncle Anson. "Welcome to Instep. Gather round, everyone. Come and see what I have here." Ada was sitting on the floor in a corner of the room playing with Sweetheart. "It's just another clock," she guessed without interest. "I'll see it later." "Just another clock?" cried Uncle Anson in an anguished tone. "No, indeed, not just another clock. The clock, the only one of its kind in the world." Egan came to the table eagerly. "My mother told me to be sure and see the clocks you make. But there's not a single one in the house," he said, watching his Uncle Anson open the package tenderly. "He keeps them all at his shop now," said Aunt Gertrude. "We used to have his clocks all over, everywhere, but I can't stand it anymore. All they do is sit there and tick you away into old age and rheumatism. And the striking, bong, time to get up, bong, time to do the washing, bong, time for lunch, and so on. And so till you're half crazy." "Oh, but Anson," she gasped as the paper fell away at last, "that's a very beautiful clock indeed." Uncle Anson, having unveiled his masterpiece, lifted it and hung it from a peg on the wall. Then he stepped back dramatically and sighed. The clock was handsome. It looked like a big figure 8 against a rectangular back and wreathed with twining wooden twigs and leaves. The lower half of the 8 was the clock face itself, but the upper half was a cleverly carved bird's nest containing a large wooden egg, while 2 more eggs did for the weights. It was all fresh and bright with new paint and a very pretty thing to see. "Now," said Uncle Anson, "wait till you hear it strike." "Oh dear," said Aunt Gertrude. "Does it strike?" "Yes, I suppose it has to." "But not like any other clock you ever heard," warned Uncle Anson, his mild face beaming with pride. He wound it carefully and set the hands near 12. They stood and listened as the clock began to tick toward the hour. Even Ada, with Sweetheart in her arms, came up to watch. Suddenly, there was a whirling and a click. The egg in the nest opened like a door, and out came a little bird. Jerkily, it spread its wings made of real red feathers, tipped with black. "Good heavens!" shrieked Aunt Gertrude, her hand flying to her heart. "It's a Kneeknock bird, Anson! You dare to make a Kneeknock bird?" In Ada's arms, Sweetheart stiffened, and the tip of his tail began to twitch. "Listen," cried Uncle Anson, "listen." The wooden bird miraculously opened its beak and began to sing. Awk, awk, weep, trilled the bird. Brrr, weep, weep. A rust-colored blur shot from Ada's arms, and in a tangle of fur and red feathers, the clock bounced off its peg, fell to the floor. There was a crash, a confused metallic sound of liberated springs and spinning gears, at last protesting, weep, weep, and then silence. And in the middle of the smashed debris sat Sweetheart, his yellow eyes glowing, and his jaws the broken wooden body of the little bird. But I don't understand, burst out Egan at supper. Why didn't you do something to that cat? Chase him out of the house or something. He looked over at the hearth where Sweetheart sat contentedly washing his face. Uncle Anson sighed heavily. He had been silent since the smashing of the clock, and he was silent now. Well, why not tell him, Anson, said Aunt Gertrude. He ought to know these things if he's going to be visiting an instep. I'll tell him, Mother, said Ada importantly. Papa put a Kneeknock bird into the clock. Egan, I guess he forgot about Sweetheart. Uncle Anson made a strangled noise. Sweetheart thought it was real. Cats are supposed to kill Kneeknock birds. The Megrimum wants them to. Egan stared. Don't be such a big dumb, Egan, said Ada, with a superior frown. Don't you know about Kneeknock birds? They live in the trees, at the top of the rise. All the cats go up and kill them and bring them down. That's how Papa got the feathers, I suppose. The Megrimum likes cats. He keeps the Kneeknock birds up there just for them. We can't go up to the top of the rise, but the cats can. He likes them, and if people are mean to a cat, the Megrimum comes down and eats them up. What about dogs? Asked Egan, slipping a bit of meat to Annabelle, where she sat under the table, her warm chin heavy on his knee. So he's giving her a little bit of food. Dogs? Pooh, said Ada scornfully. Dogs are nothing special. They never climb up the rise. Annabelle couldn't if she tried. She's too old and fat. No, cats are what the Megrimum likes, just cats. From the hearth came a long, self-satisfied rumble. Sweetheart was purring. In the middle of the night, Egan was jolted awake by a sudden crash of thunder. In the sudden wind, raindrops pelted his window like handfuls of berries. Annabelle, who had been sleeping on the cot at his feet, lifted her head, listened, and began to tremble. With bulging eyes and tail pressed tight between her legs, she slid down and scrambled under the cot, where she lay panting in the private darkness, bulky and pathetic with dread. Come on out, Annabelle, whispered Egan. It's only rain. She wouldn't budge. The rain increased and thunder boomed again. As the rumble ebbed, Egan heard a soft knock at his door, and Ada, small and ghostly in a white nightdress, tiptoed into the room. Her red hair, unbraided for the night, was wild about her shoulders, and her eyes were saucers of excitement. Now, why do you think that there's a level of excitement? Remember, the weather's turning now. It's going to rain. It's going to make some noise. What does the town celebrate? So continue to think about that as I read. Now you're going to hear it. Any minute now. Egan, isn't it thrilling? She perched cross-legged at the end of the cot with her nightdress tucked primly under her toes and cocked her head to listen. Egan listened too. I don't hear anything but rain and wind, he whispered. It'll start soon, she answered. But don't be scared. Papa left a candle at the window, like always, and a wishbone on the hearth, and Mother hung the onions on the door hinge. What's all that for? Asked Egan. A flash of lightning glared for an instant, and they sat tensely waiting for the thunder. It came with a roar that seemed to split the sky in two. From under the bed, the pace of the dog's panting quickened. I suppose that Annabelle under there, whispered Ada. She's a big coward. Now, Sweetheart, he's out somewhere in the storm. He loves it. Egan ignored the slur against his friend. "What are the candle and wishbone for?" he asked again. "My goodness, Egan," sighed Ada. "Don't you know anything? If you leave a candle in your window, the Megrimum knows you're safe inside. When he sees the wishbone, it thinks all the food is eaten up and there's none left to steal. And when it smells the onions on the door hinge, just then, from somewhere high up in the night, a thin wailing sound came riding down the wind." "That's it," hissed Ada. "Listen. There it is. First time in a month." She hugged her knees and bounced with pleasure. Egan jumped out of bed and ran to the window, pressing his face against the cold glass. The wail dimmed and then began again, deepening to a moan, hollowed, wavered, and was lost in another crash of thunder. At the window, Egan clutched the sill and stared out at the wet, swirling darkness. Leaves and twigs caught by the wind hurried up, paused, and were swept away, and the rain chased in rivers down the glass. Once more, from far above, the low moan came faintly to his ears. It rose slowly, threading to a wail again, and held for a long, terrible moment. Egan stood speechless, and Ada, coming to his side, was quiet herself for once. At last the wail drooped, dwindled, died. They waited, staring out into the storm. Suddenly, as lightning lit the darkness for a bright white instant, they both saw at the same moment a dim shape coming down the rocky side of Kneeknock Rise, just beyond the garden wall. They clutched each other. "Did you see that? What can it be? Hide, quick!" They sprang to the cot, tearing at the quilt, and buried their heads. Thunder, farther off now, muttered briefly, and then through the thinning rain they heard a tapping at the window. Egan's heart thumped like a drum. As he huddled frozen on the cot, the dreadful tapping came again, and then, quite suddenly, Annabelle stopped panting and began to bark. At the same moment, the bedroom door burst open, and they heard Aunt Gertrude calling, "Egan, what's the matter?" Then a shriek. "Oh, mercy, Anson! There at the window!" She screamed once, shrill as a whistle, and fainted into a heap. And Annabelle, emerging from under the cot, stood with her front paws on the windowsill, barking on and on against the glass, which now showed nothing but the empty, drizzling dark. So now, you've heard about their first experience, or his rather, Egan's, hearing the sounds from the Megrimum. Now, think about it. What precautions did they take so that they were assured not to be bothered by the Megrimum? What was placed on the windowsills? What kinds of, pre-planning did this family do? Do you think that putting a candle or putting an onion or putting a wishbone by a windowsill would protect you in any way today in the year 2020? I don't know. But these characters certainly thought that it would. So again, you're reminded that we're in a little village here at the foot of a tall mountain surrounded by flat fields. And not very much really goes on here. It's just probably just a little agricultural village, and people celebrate a fair once a year in the autumn to celebrate their beloved, frightening as it may be, Megrimum. Okay, guys, be thinking about that. And don't forget to sketch a picture of what Annabelle might look like. And you may want to toss in there a picture of Sweetheart, the cat. What do you think that character might look like? That's it for now, guys. Be well. Till next time, everybody.